Great pleasure. I'd like to invite the third speaker, Dr. Dilshaad Ali, who is no stranger to all of us. Dr. Dilshaad Ali is currently the Managing Director of Far East Medical Clinics in Hong Kong and Project Development Executive of FV Hospital, Vietnam. FV Hospital in Vietnam has positioned itself as a premier healthcare provider in the country, with great emphasis on quality outcome and excellent patient experience. Being a market leader in more ways than one, FV Hospital is expanding by building a network of centers across the region to fully optimize its capabilities and services to increase accessibility to quality-based healthcare. His role in line with this vision is to conceptualize and execute an exciting growth plan for FV Hospital in the form of hub and spoke model. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Dilshaad Ali to share his thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Good morning. It's been a long day yesterday. It's going to be a long day today, so I hope everybody's geared up. Okay. Unfortunately, when you're a third speaker for a very generic subject, you're going to be at the tail end of repeating whatever the two speakers have spoken before. I'm not going to sell FV. Okay, so let's look at healthcare from a simple perspective. Okay, healthcare today, if you look at it from any perspective, has become more and more complicated. And the thing is that it's not going to get any less complicated. So if we think digital is going to make it easier, it's not. And I think the biggest thing that's going to happen with healthcare today is that we're seeing disruptions happening every day. And we're seeing disruptions happening not only in hospitals, but the biggest disruption that we're going to be having is that this disruption is going to be affecting patients, their families, our workforce, and the way we choose systems that would be built to run our hospitals. Let's look at the US. If you look at the US 50 years ago, they were leaders in healthcare. Until 25 years ago, they were still leaders in healthcare. Now, you see an obsolescence happening in the West. And you see the growth engine of the world shifting to Asia. And the thing is, Africa is catching up really fast. And I keep saying this, that technology today is not something you create. It's a lot of copying, and what you do is duplicate somebody else's design, and then you just go ahead and make it better. Look at the iPhone 7 today. It's a complete copy of the Samsung. Okay? So, if you watch the news this morning, from splash-proof, it becomes waterproof, right? And the thing is, there are a generation of people today who continuously disrupt the environment with IT, also in healthcare, because they see a need for them to improve and to increase accessibility and to make healthcare mobile in many ways than one. Now, we spoke about the hospital environment, and we spoke about how we want to build hospitals of the future. I would like to look at healthcare as being a global phenomenon and not just being hospitals alone. The journey of a patient starts from the time the patient decides to choose a hospital, and that means choosing a portal which would allow the patient to have an access to information that will give the patient the best possible treatment to the nearest hospital or clinic. How do we do that now? We used to call friends on the telephone before. Now, you get on your phone, you Google it out, and within 30 seconds, you know which hospital is close to you because you just go on Google Maps and you choose hospital. Okay? And then you want to find out how to go. Do you call a taxi anymore, or do you call an ambulance? I've yet to see Uber ambulance, right? And it's coming. Because if there's a taxi which is called Uber, somebody's going to come up with an Uber ambulance app and say, I need a cab right away. And with connectivity, that's not really impossible to do today. Okay? So if you look at the US, you are seeing Wi-Fi-enabled ambulances. You are seeing people who are able to transfer data from an ECG machine for a patient who has a myocardial infarction picked up from the house. And before he reaches the hospital, the care plan's already built up, and he's probably already receiving care on the way to the hospital because the ambulance is fully equipped for him to be life supported with the data that of his vital signs being sent to the hospital without any delays at all. That's healthcare today. And if you look at the spectrum involves every single stakeholder in healthcare. I think Ms. Thuy Anh was very right. She comprehensively said the stakeholders are all to be involved. And this just doesn't involve patients as well. Okay, so the next slide is, this is big data. Now, how many of us really understand what big data is? And how big is big data? David showed us, words that we don't understand. Terabytes and petabytes, and I think the biggest byte is an iota byte, if I'm not wrong, okay? And if you speak to big data specialists, all they do is collect data. And the thing is, interestingly, I don't know how many of you have a Da Vinci machine in a hospital that you run. It's very expensive. It's a showcase. Most of the time, we don't use the machine because it's the cherry on the cake, right? Today, you have healthcare specialists, especially big data specialists, who are looking at using algorithms from a Da Vinci machine to make it programmable so that the machine can do an operation on its own. I don't know if you've heard of this. Can you imagine that there's no man behind the aeroplane and it's flying on its own? And somebody's digging at someone's prostate using a robot which is thinking on its own? Imagine. And the thing is, the advent of big data is not going to stop there, because it's going to include sensitive information which is related to patient care. We talk about cloud. On a personal level, cloud, to me, is an amazing tool for us to enlighten the burden of having storage facilities on the ground, because then you don't invest in hardware and you basically have a lighter version of an HIS which works on a cloud system. There are issues with accessibility to information, and there are also issues with safety of that information that we keep of our patients, right? And beyond that, the big data phenomenon, if you look at the utilization of the data that we keep, it's very, very small. So, are we really looking at an age where data is going to be completely used, or being hospital operators and being people who subscribe to healthcare, how important and relevant is big data to us? Okay, so it's no more virtual reality. We've seen David and Tuyan speak about connecting patients to homes, and we've seen how patients can access their hospitals from their desktop at home. There is no need for a patient to move around to call an ambulance or to speak to a doctor via phone. Everything is through the internet. Anybody heard of BYOD? It's be your own doctor. Okay? So, the biggest doctor in the world is Google. He's called Mr. Google, Miss Google, or Dr. Google in some countries as well. So this virtual reality phenomenon of trying to imagine that patients will be at home and accessing hospitals using a remote sense of connectivity is real today. The challenge is that how safe is this environment? The challenge is that you have an infirm 90-year-old sitting on a chair who's accessing his computer and getting advice via the internet, or getting advice through a teleportal that's from a hospital. Again, are we realistically looking at how safe this whole practice is? So beyond just looking at these wonderful devices that we have and technology that we think is going to work for the future, the evident reality is that we need to consider a lot of other factors around us that will make us understand that it's not about technology, it's about patient safety. Okay? In healthcare, we sell outcomes. Everybody's very clear about this. And along the way, we try and make some money because we want to buy the next best robot in the system, or we want to buy a level 6 HIMSS system, which is completely paperless, and we can access patient data from a tablet. Again, the whole flip side of this is that we really need to look at our patient safety, and we need to look at accessibility being something realistic where patient safety is never compromised. If your cloud goes down or your connectivity is disrupted, you'll have a problem. Okay, so the connected hospital today, in the US, 3.7 million medical devices alone in the US are connected, either by Bluetooth or RFID or some form of technology which allows them to be connected to the other part of the world. The number of people who are already connected to improve patient care in the US is already 315 million people. Okay, so again, we talked about the journey of the patient, and it starts from the home. And now you have technology that allows you to be treated before you reach the hospital. Okay, the thing is, In the past, if you carry your handphone into the ICU, they'd say, switch it off or leave it outside. Today, 10% of the medical devices in a hospital already are connected by Wi-Fi. Okay? So it is a phase of activity that we can't stop, but what we can do is we can make sure that it is done in a manner that allows us to adopt and adapt safely and progressively. Because realistically speaking, all these high-tech investments need a return on investment as well. So connectivity is good, it's expensive. I always say connectivity is a beast that needs to be tamed. Digital is not friendly in many ways, and in many ways we have to adapt and adopt the right technology and to look at the right way for us to use technology, again, for patient safety. Okay, so personalized health. I guess if you have a Samsung S5 and above, you can probably check your oxygen saturation now if you're, well saturated, or your pulse is racing because you have dashing speakers on the stage, right? Again, personalized healthcare is going to stay. You can now check your heart rate on an armband. You have a Fitbit, or you have an Apple Watch, or you have a smartwatch with you, which you can easily adapt. Now, again, the portability is amazing. The accessibility to this is amazing. How well does this technology work for you in terms of keeping you safe and allowing you to be in an environment where you can be attended to right away? Okay, so awareness is good, adaptability and portability is good, but I think the practicality of applications are really important. A lot of times you have red herrings into warnings that come from devices which are mobile, which really don't give the value of digital. I'm being very pessimistic, or not pessimistic, but I think the reality of things is that adoption requires a lot of research and a lot of thinking before we go into digital, because that's going to be the challenge of the future. I spoke yesterday about a generation that's called Generation Z, baby who learns, who probably doesn't see the father before he sees an iPhone. It's real. If you're in the labor ward with your wife delivering a baby, the first thing the baby is going to see is probably the midwife's face, and the second thing the baby is going to see is an iPhone, because there's a selfie with the mother. Okay? So the generation is changing. Connectivity is definitely going to be something that we have to adapt and adopt to. Personalized medicine, yes, it's the way of the future. Handheld devices, as Steve Jobs said, are extensions of our beings. And thanks to him, everybody's married to a handphone today, if not two. Okay, so the future of healthcare is digital, yes, agreed. But I think being healthcare operators, managers, professionals, people who invest in healthcare, people who urge us to invest in healthcare, we look at three different things. We look at a platform of how we adopt our IT investments. That's really important. And the entire view of an ecosystem of healthcare is very important to consider when we are adopting digital technology, where it's going to disrupt a lot of things. And the disruptive nature of IT is not confined towards changing a device. It's disruptive because you're looking at behaviors, you're looking at characteristics of an organization, you're looking at how workflows will change, you're looking at how you will design how hospitals work in the future. Okay? So it's not just buying an HRS system and plugging it in and say, I have an HRS system. There are many different steps that we need to take before we adopt technology. And the most important thing that we need is, when we adopt technology and we have an IT strategy in place, it's not just the IT strategy, it's the strategy of the entire organization. So, to sum up what I've presented, I've taken a completely different view on this, a 180-degree turn, because yes, we are pro-digital. We think that the future is going to be digital. It's going to be IT-driven. It's going to be driven by people who are IT-savvy, born with different capabilities and run the world differently, from being a generation that's at the end of the alphabet. And then you have the next generation, which is called Alpha Alpha, in case you didn't know. The challenge is that we have to be real, and we have to be basically focusing on the core business of looking at patient safety and looking at the practicality of us adopting IT before we adopt a system that will basically disrupt the entire ecosystem. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll share more on